Okay, this is the Budget and Appropriations Committee of the Baltimore City Council. We are here today for Council Bill 20-0527. This is the ordinance of estimates for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2021. Councilman Eric Costello from the 11th District, Chair of the committee. I'm joined today by Councilwoman Shannon Sneed, 13th District, Vice Chair of the committee, Councilman Leon Pinkett, 7th District, Councilman Ed Risinger, 10th District, Council President Brandon Scott, Councilman Isaac Gitzi Schleifer, 5th District, Councilwoman Mary Pat Clark, 14th District.
Thank you.
Councilman Leon Pinkett, 7th District. All right, it's changing my order in WebEx. I think I got everyone. Council member. Councilman Chris Burnett, 8th District.
Mr. Chair, can we have everybody mute themselves, please?
Yes, can everyone please mute? Thank you. We have Matt Stegman and Nina Themlis on behalf of Mayor Jack Young. We have Dominic McAlilly, Kaylin Young, and Rebecca Simmons on behalf of Council President Brandon Scott. We have Marguerite Curran, who is staff to the committee. With us from the Department of Public Works today is Acting Director Matt Garbark, as well as Director of Legislative Affairs, Marcia Collins. I know that Matt has a number of DPW personnel from his team on the line as well. With that, Matt, I'm going to turn it over to you for your presentation, and then we shall get into questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. President Scott, members of the committee, and other council members. Let me just pull this content up real quick right here. Okay. Before I begin the presentation, I want to just make the council aware of a situation that has come up today. It's honestly been unfolding right until this hearing, right before we came here. There's been an alarming number of positive COVID-19 cases at our east side solid waste yard located on Bowley's Lane. The number of positive cases have begun to affect our operational ability to conduct our essential services. Because of this, and out of an abundance of caution, effective tomorrow, Wednesday, June 10th, all operations out of our east side facility will be suspended for a period of 3 weeks, and all employees in the location will be sent home for self-isolation. In order to reassign staff and provide enough crews to collect trash, we will unfortunately also have to be suspending recycling collection citywide for 3 weeks. We know that there are many people who do regular recycling consistent with the directions and guidance of the governor and the mayor on phased reopenings, and to provide an additional location for people to drop off their recycling. We are going to be reopening the Sisson Street Convenience Center effective Wednesday, June 10th, tomorrow. We will collect everyone's trash. If we do not get around to collecting your trash on your assigned day, it will be collected the next day. And I do want to thank everyone for the cooperation and understanding at this time. A press announcement is going to be going out later, but I did want to make the committee and the council aware of that. This has been a situation that has unfortunately been unfolding over the past couple of weeks, and it has reached a state where we needed to act. And with that, I'm going to begin my presentation. My name is Matthew Garbark. I'm the Acting Director of the Department of Public Works, and I'm joined remotely by the Bureau of Solid Waste.
Mr. Director, can you stop for 1 second?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, can I have the floor, Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Director Garbark, I appreciate your openness, but let me start off by saying how, if we knew that for a long period of time, how inappropriate it is for the council and I to find out in this juncture, at this hour, in this venue. This is something that you guys should have had a conversation with us early in the day about. So we just have to know how inappropriate it is for us to find this out at this hour when you guys have been around all day. We have to pick up the phone and call people. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. President. Director
Certainly, and I do apologize for that. It was something that has been unfolding and it just reached a position right before this hearing. So I do apologize for not giving any more heads up on that. My name is Matt Garbark. I'm the Acting Director of Public Works. I'm joined remotely by the Bureau Head of Solid Waste, Mr. John Chalmers, the Acting Head of Water and Wastewater, Mr. Joseph Cabetti, Legislative Liaison, Marcia Collins, and other subject matter experts who can help answer any of your questions as they may arise. This is DPW's mission and our vision statement, which guides and directs everything that we do as a department. DPW's organizational chart has changed quite a bit over the past year. We have a detailed organizational chart with our various divisions that I believe Ms. Collins has provided to the chairman. The chiefs have been changing quite a bit over the past year, which has required regular updates to this chart.
Hang on,
This
Matt.
is the current.
Matt, hang on one second. Colleagues, I think you all should be in receipt of that org chart. Let me just double check. Oh, it did? And you sent it to the whole council?
Yeah, we have it.
Okay, all right. So it was from Matt Stegman about 40 minutes ago, because I know you all are receiving a lot of other emails. Please continue, Matt. Apologies for the interruption.
Not at all. This right here on your screen is just a very high level org chart. Obviously, the department is broadly divided into 4 functional areas. John Chalmers obviously runs the Bureau of Solid Waste. Mr. Joseph Cabetti runs the Bureau of Water and Wastewater. Chief Administrative Officer Julie Day oversees our administrative and financial operations, and our Chief of Staff, Johnny Hemphill, oversees our design, construction, and IT divisions. I know you all are familiar with who we are, but here are just a few very high-level points. We have more than 2,700 employees. We provide drinking water to 1.8 million citizens in the Baltimore region. We collect trash from over 210,000 households in the city each week. We also perform street sweeping. We clean up illegal dumping, the harbor, and provide rat abatement citywide. So beginning with the Bureau of Solid Waste, the Bureau is responsible for cleaning the right-of-way, also for collecting trash and recycling from over 210,000 households. And they are responsible for cleaning and boarding vacant properties and abating rats. They also operate the Quarantine Road landfill and the Northwest Transfer Center, as well as 5 residential convenience drop-off centers. Beginning with the different services in the budget, Service 660 includes the costs to administer the Bureau. Fiscal year 2021 maintains the same level of service. The $2.3 million that are reflected is because of reclassifying of existing positions to more appropriately reflect the job and the performance that is being performed. Service 661 involves maintenance and cleaning of public rights-of-way. These services include street and alley operations, street sweeping, cleaning of the central business district, and marine operations. Main difference in the fiscal year 2021 budget includes $600,000 from the casino local impact grant for sanitation services around the casino. We also have $2 million in federal grant funding and another $1 million for cleaning the waterways around the casino. Also, it's important to note that $700,000 in a reduction is included in this. This is the elimination of the line item for graffiti removal. The city is still going to perform this service. It is just not going to be a line item, and the discussions that we're having now is how those services can be performed and coordinated with the existing operating agencies and the individual assets that they own. Service 662 provides cleaning, boarding, and mowing of vacant properties. This service also includes rat abatement services. We are happy to have $1 million in community development block grant funds to supplement cleaning and boarding. We also have $100,000 in CDBG funds for rat abatement as well. Service 663 includes our routine waste and recycling services. As noted, we collect waste and recycling from over 210,000 households, 290 multifamily dwellings, and some businesses. Funding for fiscal year 2021 will remain at the same level. This budget also includes a $250,000 grant from the Recycling Partnership to support an anti-contamination campaign. Service 664 covers the disposal of nearly 700,000 tons of mixed refuse and recycling at the city's Quarantine Road landfill and its Northwest transfer station. Fiscal year 2021 budget includes $944,000 for its eventual closure and $5.8 million for its expansion. While fiscal year 20 has been a challenging year, having begun and ended in emergency conditions, we have accomplished quite a bit during this year. We've expanded the small haulers program that has been very successful. We've reduced a near 9,000 backlog service request backlog in the 311 system almost to zero, and we did that while in the midst of the COVID pandemic. We also have 17% fewer citizen complaints, and we have seen a 17% increase in proactive public right-of-way cleaning. We renovated the Northwest transfer station, which was in need of significant improvements to its Wi-Fi as well as its broadband and some electrical work. And we've closed 291,000 service requests to date. We've also created a daily dashboard that helps us manage our daily operations. And we worked with the Housing Authority of Baltimore City to proactively abate thousands of rats in public housing around the city. Moving forward, we will be working with the Recycling Partnership on a recycling campaign. We have also published our solid waste master plan for public comment and will look to begin implementing its recommendations. We will also work on our proposed expansion of the landfill. Moving on to the Bureau of Water and Wastewater. As was mentioned earlier, the Bureau of Water and Wastewater provides clean drinking water to 1.8 million customers every single day. It also manages the treatment and disposal of wastewater, as well as the conveyance of stormwater back to waterways. It is important to note that because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and because many of our commercial operations in the city have had to shutter since the beginning of the pandemic, we are estimating, as with the city, the utility is estimating a 20% reduction in revenues for the fiscal year 2021 budget. Service 670 involves the administration of the Bureau. The level of service for this function remains the same, but the budget has been reduced by about $8 million. The reason for this is because of the projected reduction in expenditures from some of the cost containments that we have put into place. We reimburse the general fund for certain services that are performed by city departments. This includes procurement, human resources, payroll, IT, et cetera. Because we are reining in our costs, there will be less charges and thus less need for reimbursement. So that's why that reduction is reflected. Service 671 includes the costs for operating our water distribution system. It includes management of our 3 reservoirs and watersheds, 3 filtration plants, numerous pumping stations, and over 3,800 miles of water mains. It also includes the management of over 23,000 fire hydrants. Budget for this remains flat. We could not reduce the budget from this service because there are a lot of chemicals as well as other commodities that the pricing is pretty fixed, and there is not a whole lot of room for cost reduction or containment. Service 672 pertains to the water and wastewater consumer services. This provides for water meter reading and billing of our 412,000 water accounts. This service includes the installation and maintenance of meters, billing operations, and customer service operations. Reduction in the budget for this service is due to a reduction in equipment that is needed due to some of the final conversions of the meter system. Also, there have been deferments of some purchases that have been considered, and also we are going to be looking and managing overtime much more closely to bring some of these costs down. Service 673 is for the collection and treatment of over 200 million gallons of wastewater each day. This includes operations at the Tapsco and Back River wastewater treatment plants, 12 pumping stations, and 1,400 miles of sewer main. Reduction in expenses accounts for cost containment strategies to address the shortfall. These include deferring some vehicle replacements as well as limiting overtime. Service 674 provides for the protection, enhancement, and restoration of watersheds within Baltimore City. This includes our MS4 permit requirements and compliance with the Clean Water Act. It also includes the maintenance of our 1,100 miles of storm drains. We do not estimate a major issue for this service in terms of revenue reduction because this is based on the amount of impervious surface. So it's based on a square footage or an area of a property rather than on volumetric consumption that occurs with the water and wastewater accounts. Service 675 involves the design and construction management functions for the water, wastewater, and stormwater capital projects. This increase in the budget accounts for the increased debt service that has been accrued from capital projects that have previously been funded. So it's important to note this is not our actual capital program. This is the operating costs in order to operate the capital program. So that is why it is not as high as the capital program, but this reflects the operating costs for that. We have accomplished quite a bit over the past year that we believe have been quite successful. We implemented our enhanced customer affordability program called BH2O, and we actually added a feature to that due to the COVID crisis, which involved people who were unemployed being able to access this program as well. We've seen a reduction in sanitary sewer overflows. We also completed the enhanced nutrient removal system at the Tapsco wastewater treatment plant, and we made significant progress on the Back River wastewater treatment plant enhanced nutrient removal system. These two projects in and of themselves are going to contribute significantly to the health of the Chesapeake Bay. Service 676 includes operating costs for the overall Department of Administration. This includes human resources, IT, fiscal management, contract administration, and other specific DPW functions within the department. The service helps to fund our successful small business development program, which has helped train and develop many small and local businesses in the city to be successful subcontractors, and in some cases, actually successful prime contractors as well. It also funds our award-winning YH2O youth internship program and many services that support other agencies such as safety and training. We provide such services for other operational departments as well. Finally, we have worked hard to implement the provisions of Ordinance 18-160, which is the equity assessment legislation that was passed last year. We have employed a director of equity. We established the Office of Equity and Environmental Justice. We realigned the equal employment opportunity function as part of our equity mission. We published an informational brochure on DPW's equity program. We established a DPW equity committee. We conducted several training sessions on equity for our employees, both in the field as well as in the office. We established equity as a critical component of our performance plan for our MAPS employees. We also incorporated equity into our integrated planning framework for capital planning purposes. So actually, equity is one of the components that is used when identifying and deciding about our projects moving forward. We provide an equity analysis of key legislation, and we have obtained grant funding from Johns Hopkins University on equity opportunities and partnerships that we can make going forward to help expand our roles and our equity commitment. Finally, we have prepared a year one report and have drafted a strategic plan for equity and the department. I know that was pretty quick, but I wanted to make sure there was plenty of time for any questions. So I thank you all for your time, and I would be happy to answer any questions you might have. And if I can't, I do have many of my colleagues standing by to help answer your questions.
Can we please take down the presentation? Thank you. Colleagues, I'm going to ask that everyone stick to the 2-question limit because I know several of us have several questions for DPW. We'll start off with Council President Scott.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Director Garbach. Let me first off by saying that I greatly appreciate your attention to detail on equity and know that your agency can shine as a example for the other agencies. I actually attended one of the trainings just to check it out with you guys, so I appreciate that. Just one other question, because I know you worked on it in the capital budget about equity. Can you talk about how in the operating budget you centered your operating budget around equity?
Absolutely. So many of the services are straightforward. We have to fund them no matter what. But obviously, some of the priorities and some of the different aspects that we're focusing on can be reflected in that. And I'm going to ask, is Linda Batts on? She is our equity coordinator and can speak much more effectively as she has been working closely on this. So, Ms. Batts?
Hello?
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, sir. Good afternoon, distinguished members of the council and Council President Brandon Scott. Thank you so much for joining us at our launch off of the equity training for the senior managers in DPW. We appreciated your high-level comments and certainly appreciate your leadership towards this particular ordinance. We have been looking very carefully at both of our budgets, the capital budget and the operating budget. This past year, we simply asked all of the managers and supervisors to delineate in their operating budget how each of their line items requested aligned with furtherance of the equity mission. This year, coming forward in fiscal year 21, we're going to be looking much more closely at the dispensation of funds across different object class lines to determine the equity impact. So we're going to be looking, for example, at the allocation of resources and awards by ethnic group for employees. We're going to be looking at how training has been allocated with respect to equity across the department. And we're also going to be looking to determine whether or not the outcomes that the managers and supervisors have aligned with their performance requirement support tangible differences, whether for equity internal to the agency or for outcomes that are associated with our deliverables and our service to the communities.
Thank you. Thank you very much, ma'am. And thank you for your hard work. It's really, I know for me and the members of the council, it's actually great to see an agency already ahead of many of the others on their work. So thank you. Thank you very much. Director Garbach, my next question is in reference, Mr. Chair, my second question is in reference to Service 672, water and wastewater consumer services. You guys list in the budget, you talk about that the budget accounts for increased utilization of the BH2O as the agency continues to promote the program. Can you talk about how this budget also reflects the implementation of the Water Accountability and Equity Act, and any updates you have on the actual implementation of the program required by law?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. President. That's obviously much on everyone's minds. The assistance that is needed for water at this point in time because of the economic crisis and so many other issues is very critical. The budget reflects a amount that was set aside for BH2O. That amount of money is programmed in the line item. It's programmed in the budget, and that is for, I believe it's for assistance generally, I should say. I don't think it is specifically identified just for BH2O program, but it is for water assistance programs generally. So that would be the funding, or the funding source that would cover any of those assistance programs. I can't recall exactly how much it was for this year, but it's an escalating number. I want to say it's either 7 or 10 million. But what we're doing, an update on where we are in terms of implementing the legislation that was passed. We published our draft regulations for the appeals and the advocate program. We are looking at comments. We did receive a lot of comments. We are looking at all of them, are considering every single one individually. The thing we are still working on, what we are still examining, is in our system, how our system actually can implement those specific tiers and the individualized calculations. That is something that our system is just something that we have to work through. We are looking at it now. It is just a very complex situation that requires a pretty detailed look. We are trying to do as much as we can with that, but looking at that and sort of unfolding all of that has been somewhat of a challenge. Additionally, some of the positions that are needed, we have moved forward on them. They have been taken from some surplus positions in the water utility and are moving to the Expenditure Control Committee, which reviews all of that, and then it will be sent on to the Board of Estimates probably in the next week or two. Those will open up the positions that will be necessary to fill for the program, or for the advocate and the appellate portion of the program, and that'll then allow us to begin advertising and begin hiring people to actually fill that program. So we are committed to being on track with that program. The continuing issue, and we have met tirelessly. We have met week in and week out on this with our IT folks and with our customer service folks to try to understand what this system can and cannot do. And it has just been a struggle as of late to figure that out, because it is a complex situation, and the system is pretty complex as well, and it would have to require some changes, and it has been an ongoing process.
Two things. One, can you have someone give to us the actual amount for the assistance in the line item, because that'll be good information for us to know what that is. And then can you give examples of the difficulties with the technology?
Certainly. Mr. Brogdon, Troy Brogdon is our CFO. Can you provide, what is the line item for the assistance this year?
The line item this year is 8 million, and in 21 it rises to 10 million.
Okay. So the difficulty in the system is that there are 3 different systems, computer systems, that talk to one another. One of them takes the meter readings from the individual meters. One of them then translates that meter reading into something that looks at the cost based on the data that was retrieved from the meter. And the third system actually takes that and then generates the individualized bill. The way the data is taken from the meter and put through those 3 systems is it is in sort of a large amount of data, and it's done very quickly, and it's done automatically. So basically, it takes this data, it puts it through these systems, and then it generates sort of generalized billing. The BH2O program, what that did is basically anyone who was enrolled in that was sort of a mark or a box that was checked, so to speak, in the final system, that before it got sent out, it automatically included a 43% reduction in those bills. So it was a fixed amount. Anyone who actually was eligible for that, the last step, it took 43% out. We were able to refine that as it was a fixed amount. What this legislation is calling for is individualized calculations based on people's individual incomes. So that requires a lot of data inputs, and where those data inputs are put in upfront and how that actually gets into those systems and then generates a billing reduction is been one of the challenges that we've been looking at, because it is essentially looking at a customer-based billing approach rather than a premise-based billing approach, which is what we have been using so far.
And do you have a timeline on when we think those will be remedied?
We are expecting an assessment, a final assessment from our consultants who are working with our IT folks and our customer service folks within the next week or two about what is absolutely needed in order to refine that program and to move it forward. So we should have that soon, and I'm happy to get that to the committee.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. President. Matt, first I want to thank everyone at the department, especially John Chalmers, Jerome Ragsdale, Tony Galloway, and Yosef Kabid, who have all been phenomenal dealing with water and wastewater as well as solid waste issues. First thing I want to talk about is the contract issue for grass mowing. My understanding is there were some contract issues with several agencies. Was DPW caught in that?
We have a couple of different contracts. We have one of our contracts that was kind of the beginning of a lot of the issues that were occurring had to do with mowing around our reservoirs. That was a specialized mowing process for invasive weeds and species. It was in a very tight area of the reservoirs, the Druid Park Reservoir, excuse me, and others. And it had sort of a steep pitch to it. It was not a very easy or conducive area. There was some concern about using contract work versus employing youth to do those services. That was kind of the first iteration and issue with that. And also but that was just our first, it was a small contract. We also have a contract for our reservoir maintenance outside of the city in our larger reservoir areas, as well as the grass around the filtration and treatment plants. And then we also have a contract for vacant house mowing contracts. And that was not done with the same vendor that we have that has been involved in all of these mowing issues. That is a different vendor contract. That is a different vendor that is performing that work.
Okay, but all the contracts are current now?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Second thing I want to talk about is GPS on street sweeping vehicles. Where are we at on that?
I'm going to defer to Mr. Chalmers so he can give us an update on what we are doing with our geolocator contracts. John?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
So good evening, Council Chair Costello, Council President Scott, and committee members. I know last year we were talking about the software to route not only mechanical street sweeping, but to route the mixed refuse and other operations as well. Unfortunately, due to the ransomware attack and COVID-19, it kind of set us back. But the good news is that we do have a contract in place. We also have a pilot for the operations that we just signed off on. So we should be getting underway very, very soon. That is my top priority. As we deal with COVID-19 and we had to disband some of the operations, bringing folks from outside of the Bureau to help assist with some of these operations, because most of our operations are route driven, it puts us at a disadvantage. So I will be working very closely to make sure that this gets up and running very, very quickly.
I appreciate that, John. What would you say is the time frame? And you mentioned there's a pilot. Is it just going to be a subset of the vehicles which are going to pilot out the GPS technology?
Councilman, I would have to, I could update you with that information after the hearing. I can give you a timeline.
I would definitely appreciate that. My view on this program is certainly not a reflection on my view of you or your staff, but I don't know that there is a program in city government that I dislike more than this program. And the fact that we continually have citizens have their cars cited for violating the signage that took 5 years to put up. I've been asking for 5 years and finally started getting put up about a year and a half ago. I'm sick and tired of people getting citations and then coming to me and telling me that the street sweeper never came down the street. So we've got to have some level of accountability. If we're going to hold our citizens accountable, we need to hold ourselves accountable in government. And again, that's not a reflection on you, John. I just don't like the program, period. It hasn't been effective. But I'm hopeful with you at the helm and with the introduction of this GPS technology that we can turn that around. I would greatly appreciate if you could get me something in writing prior to, let's say today is Tuesday. You think you could get something by Thursday?
Absolutely.
With an update on where things are at, how many vehicles we have in the fleet, how many vehicles are going to have the GPS piloted on them, and when we expect to have all of our vehicles have GPS. And that contract or the vendor that we have on board on contract, that's the group that we're planning to go with for the full rollout of this, correct?
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And that contract's been executed, and so that's well on its way, correct?
Yes.
Okay, John, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
And just want to note that I share your frustration. I get the same calls with the driver turnover. We definitely need this software.
Absolutely. Thank you, John. I'm going to go to Vice Chairman Pinkett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Garback, the last year under the leadership of Councilman Burnett, City Council held a hearing on, basement backups, sewer backups. And quite frankly, it was unsettling to me to see what I perceive to be the lack of support that our residents get when they experience this. So can you tell me what has been the progress that we had on any type of basement backup program, and how close are we to the potential of being able to cover residents when they experience these types of events?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I really appreciate that question. That's obviously been something that has been extremely concerning to many of our customers, as well as many in our department as well. I can tell you we've convened a working group. We have met many different times. There has been a very strong exchange of ideas and opinions, sometimes quite extensively. Mr. Yosef Kabedi, the head of the Bureau for Water and Wastewater, has been leading that effort. I'm going to ask Yosef to give an update on it. So, Yosef.
Shit, you say his last name Kabedi? My apologies. Yosef, I am so sorry. I've been pronouncing your name wrong the entire time. My sincere apologies.
Yosef?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
That's okay. A lot of people mispronounce the name. No offense taken. So regarding building backups, I'm not sure if you can see me. I'm trying to turn the video on. In any case, so as you know, there is an expedited reimbursement program that is part of the consent decree. And what we are in the process of, what Director Garbach just mentioned, is essentially trying to enhance that program and establish a system whereby whenever these backups occur, we can provide the cleaning service for the residents as opposed to expecting them or having them, as they do now, come out of pocket and then reimburse them. The thing that we all have to appreciate, obviously, are the fiscal constraints in doing that type of program. So we are looking at first establishing a pilot, setting aside, earmarking some money that we can actually use for that. And so we have been looking at best practices with other utilities in the region. And so we are now in the process of trying to fast track a contract using a cooperative agreement with one of our utility partners to utilize the vendors that they use to provide this cleaning. So we will have that formulated and established, hopefully in the next few weeks, and we can provide some updates as we go along.
Thank you. We look forward to that update within the next 2 or 3 weeks. It is a critical. I think it was loud and clear from the council that it's critical that we provide that service for our residents. They are our customers, and so I think it is the least that we can do to make certain we provide that. So thank you for that update.
Sure thing.
Mr. Chair, my second question. I know there's already been some discussion related to the equity program, and obviously I want to make certain that the resources are there for that program and analysis. But I want to know how our equity program, as it relates to DPW, is informing our MBE, WBE, and local hiring as it relates to the capital projects that DPW undertakes. I know a couple years ago the council had a hearing on specifically the Ashburton and Druid projects and the MBE participation as well as the local hiring. Want to know how, I wasn't pleased with where we were there, but how are we using the equity program to assure that there is significant MBE, WBE participation, in addition to making certain that there are local hiring goals and met associated with our capital projects?
So I'm going to ask Ms. Batts to answer, but before that, I do want to mention that as part of our modified consent decree that we entered into with the EPA, we agreed to fund a small business development program. That program has been really, really successful. What we've been able to do is bring young, smaller, newer local businesses. Many of them are minority or women-owned businesses. We've been able to bring them together. We've been able to link them up with established firms and others who have been able to successfully bid and win contracts for the city. There's a whole module of courses that this program goes through, including a detailed explanation of the city's procurement process, as well as various networking events, as well as our minority business program and how to be certified and continue to stay certified as a minority business. Specific to the Department of Public Works, that is something that we do take very seriously, that a lot of our work is in fact potential stimulus for local jobs and local economic benefits. That is something we need and have to grow. And I know Ms. Batts she has looked at quite a bit. She's looked at the entire department and sort of is piecing it out. And I do believe she has looked at some of our contracts and some of our projects. So Ms. Batts, do you want to add anything to that?
Thank you so much, Director. I can tell you, Councilman Pinkett, that improving performance for MBEs and WBEs is among one of the highest priorities that I can ascribe to the equity program, because the capital budget is one of the biggest bang for your buck opportunities that has the potential to change outcomes and lives for the people whom are able to benefit from those opportunities. As our director indicated, we have a number of initiatives underway with our business development program that has yielded successful results. I will share with you that I know that our chief of staff is taking a much deeper examination of performance around the MBE WBE program, and has been doing that while my efforts were directed towards some of the other initiatives like the basement backup program. And I would ask Director Garbuck that perhaps Director Garbuck, that we check with our chief of staff and perhaps schedule a briefing for the council or Councilman Pinkett as appropriate to outline the work that they are doing. And I know that they have some pretty progressive work underway in that area.
Yes, I'd certainly like to offer that. We'd be happy to sit down as whenever you like, Councilman, or any members of the council. I also would like to add that this year, within the past year, the Board of Estimates took some pretty unprecedented action against one of our larger companies, one of our larger firms that has done business. They had routinely not been in compliance. The Board of Estimates actually chose to withhold a large portion of its retainage. It was a lot of money. They got that impression very loud, very clearly. As soon as that happened, the next time we requested any sort of update or progress report, all of our firms were immediate sending that in. So that got a lot of people's attention. And I think the board took a really good forward step in holding folks accountable. I can tell you that I know that Mayor Young and myself and others, we do not bring contracts forward unless it's an absolute emergency that where there is out of compliance with MBE, WBE. So that is something that we hold as a very top priority.
Thank you, Director. And I would welcome that briefing. And I think that, especially in the current climate, just as important as racial justice is economic justice, and the level of projects that come through DPW have the ability to transform communities. And so I think somewhere within our analysis, there should be performance measures that look at how we utilize those capital projects to grow our MBE, WBE, as well as promote the local hiring that could be a stimulus to change in communities. So thank you, Director. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. We are going to go to Councilman Ed Reisinger next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Matt, my question is regards to the less waste, better Baltimore master plan. Geo Tentec is the consultant for the city of Baltimore and Department of Public Works. And I read the report, and the consultant stated there's potential options if implemented. And I use the word implemented. And the report also states that they can meet goals will require additional funding to be approved by the city council, as well as deviation from DPW's current funding mechanism. So I heard you earlier say that you were looking at implementing some goals. So my question, and I didn't see it unless I missed it, in DPW's budget, are we looking at any money for this plan, this master plan?
So thank you, Councilman, and thank you. I know you've been a true leader and advocate on this area. And we, in our capital budget, there has been a line item that has been placed in there It's about $500,000. That is not a whole lot to do much of anything with. However, that was placed in there sort of as a placeholder so that we can begin working with other stakeholders to lay out a much more detailed process and plan moving forward. So we've already met with the Sustainability Office and the Department of Planning to try to figure out how we can start setting ourselves up. The good thing with that is it looks like the Planning Commission has included that, line item for the next 6 planning years. Obviously, that could change. It could go up or it could go down, but it does show that the Planning Commission is very interested in this. I know you're a member of it as well, Councilman, and it's something that we need to look at, prioritize, and figure out the funding sources, because it's going to cost a lot of money to implement these, and we're going to have to think very creatively and think about some innovative partnerships with the community and nonprofits and business entities.
I'm glad to hear that because the one thing I know, Rome wasn't built in a day, and with this plan, it's like with the recycling, with the yellow cans. Have you looked at that? I mean, even if it's a pilot in certain areas, to have the recycle cans going into the city of Baltimore, the big ones, because we've seen where when the city bought the green cans for trash, people are using that, and the numbers went down. So I'm just looking at the recycle cans. If we have a plan, the goal to implement those recycle cans within the city of Baltimore, do you have a cost that might be and the timeline that it could happen?
Well, again, thank you for that question. That's extremely important, and I think that also goes to an issue of equity, because not everyone can afford either or afford the cans, or B, have transportation to go get the cans because they're sold at different places throughout the city. That is something that really is important as we try to put equity into our solid waste efforts and make it easier for people to recycle who want to recycle. It's about $9 million is what our assessment is, and that's for a full citywide 210,000 can deployment.
Right.
There are a lot of grants, there are a lot of companies, there are a lot of other groups out there that are very interested in partnering on these initiatives. Many companies that have become more socially conscious have committed to sustainability efforts and in supporting ways to improve recycling and other initiatives. It is something we are actively working on. It is $9 million. The big critical piece in that is the funding piece and where all that money comes from. However, we are looking at it, and we very much support that idea and want to try to implement it as soon and as best we can.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that, and because there are foundations and other companies that will contribute because it's recycled, and so thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I got one more question. You said we had 2.
Go right ahead, Councilman.
Yeah, my second question is the DPW. What is the status in regards to the fleet and the department when it comes to illegal dumping because of the coronavirus? Are we short CDL drivers? Are we not picking up regular because of the pandemic? What is the status right now? And John Chalmers, like Councilman Costello said, I'm not on blaming mode. I know your issues, your concerns, your problems, but can you communicate with us what the status is?
So yes, Councilman, I can. So we're actively working 50% of our resources on a daily basis. And that's to create social distancing in the yards, to create an environment in which the men and women can come to work safely. So that's why we're working with 50%. So we are addressing, all of the public right-of-way service requests. But folks got to keep in mind, it's not going to be business as usual. So to give you an example, at the start of each shift, you got about 75 to 80 employees reporting to work at the same time. You have to create social distancing. So they have to line up 6 feet apart in front of a time clock. They have to use their thumb to swipe in. Once they swipe in, you have to sanitize the time clock. Then those employees have to move on to receive their PPE in the morning. We want to make sure that they have personal protection equipment. We want to make sure that they have it every single day. We want to reiterate that to them each morning, the importance of having that equipment on. So it's not going to be business as usual. Once that piece of the morning is done, then they have to move on to their vehicle. You have to sanitize the vehicle in the morning to make sure, again, our employees are safe. Then they go to work. So we have service level agreements that we're not going to meet those. We're not going to meet the threshold. We're not going to make it because it's just not business as usual. But we are working. We are working as fast and efficiently as we can. But we'll get through this. We'll get through this.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Chris Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Acting Director Garbart, for you and your team, especially our hardworking solid waste and sanitation crews. They are my favorite, hardest working folks in city government. So thank you for all that they do and your agency does. I just was asking, a lot of what I wanted to discuss has already been covered by my colleagues, line of questioning, so I won't reiterate those things, but I did find out firsthand yesterday that the small haulers pilot ended yesterday, which was fine. I actually forgot it was a pilot because it seemed to be running so smoothly. Is there, I know that there'll be some time needed to assess the impact of the small hauler pilot program, but are there any, preliminary outcomes that you can share with the council on this program?
It is, it's disheartening that, we implemented this program and then COVID-19 hit us. So to give you an example, September 27th, we had about 15,000 overdue work orders. And I know I'm getting off track here a little bit. We had about 15,000 overdue work orders in the system. By May 29th, May 29th, we were down to 0. We implemented the small haulers program, and the data that we wanted to use would have been looking at, dirty streets, dirty alleys, the reduction in illegal dumping. However, the pandemic skewed the data. We are going to look at the data that we can look at, but we're not going to get that holistic view of what actually transpired during the entire pilot program. Preliminary findings, I will say this, that the program was very well liked. There were lines at the transfer station that wrapped around the block. I noticed anecdotally that my phone didn't ring off the hook, but people complaining about standing or waiting in that line. The comments that I got, they were very appreciative, but the purpose of the program was to see if it would have an effect on illegal dumping across the city. But again, unfortunately, the pandemic kind of skewed the numbers, looking at cleaning services. But to answer your question, we will get back to you with the data that we do have, and I am working with the Mayor's Innovation Team and my Office of Support Services to compile that data.
No, it's helpful. I waited in the line twice in the last couple of weeks, but it was fine. The crew, the staff was very welcoming. Everybody seemed to be good, and it was a very good program and something that I was obviously excited to see because I know you and I have had several conversations about trying to make that a standard practice that you can just take the stuff to the dump, no questions asked. As a tactic to address the legal dumping challenges in the city. So, but I definitely understand the impact that this virus is going to have. But I do look forward to touching base once you do have that preliminary assessments to at least give us some picture on if this is something that we could move forward with. Thank you. That's all I had, Mr. Chair. Like I said, everything else has been covered that I wanted to talk about today.
Thank you. Councilwoman Sneed.
Yes, my questions are more so to the next large project after the Bag River Head Works. I'm just wondering if we have anything in the works that's going to be coming up that we should know about.
In terms of our large capital projects?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we have, our capital program is over $1 billion, and coming down, looking forward at that, we're going to be moving into a lot of facility improvements and replacements. The headworks is obviously going to help deal with the overall hydraulic restriction that the entire wastewater system is experiencing, which really causes a majority of those backups that the sanitary sewer overflows. It's addressing that issue. Many of our capital projects going forward are actually looking at improving our facilities. Specifically, one in particular is going to be the Vernon Pumping Station, which is nearly 70 years old. The pumps have been in continuous use for decades. They need to be upgraded. The entire facility needs to be upgraded. And these are some of the larger projects. Mr. Troy Brogdon, do you want to give sort of any other big projects that we have coming down the coming forward that we're going to be looking at in the next couple of years?
Sure. Just to let you know, our FY21 CIP for just that fiscal year is $600 million. As Director Garbark stated, the entire capital program for the 6-year CIP is well over $1 billion. But to address some specific projects that are coming up, let me just read a few off. So we have the rehabilitation of the Mount Vernon pumping stations. That's about a $45 million project. We have the Cromwell pumping station improvements. That's $35 million. We have the headworks improvements at the Patapsco wastewater facility, and that's about $70 million. And then we have some other what we call water contracts. We're going to do some water main replacements. That's to the tune of about $30 million. So we have a very robust capital program. Thanks to, again, our equity department led by Linda Batts, we are incorporating equity throughout the city, as well as other factors such as health, safety, and our environmental and regulatory demands that we must meet. But again, very robust program, and it helps the city to remain thriving.
And will we be able to incorporate a jobs piece in this too? Or everything will be basically contracted out and it will be up to the contractor to hire local residents to work on some of these projects?
With that, I'll turn that back over to Director Garbar.
These are all large full procurement contracts. They're going to have to abide by the local hiring laws as well as any other ordinance or policies that are in place with that. So they'll have to report on the local hiring efforts that they make. However, we are, as part of our overall program, this overall modified consent decree program, which is not the reason, but this is sort of the path we're moving forward on to address all of our wastewater issues. These major projects are being funded by that. One of the things we're doing is developing small and minority and local businesses. We're also developing a YH2O internship program specifically geared to bring young people into the water and wastewater industry. Many of our employees are near retirement age, and we need to create the next generation of employees who can take over when our current employees begin to retire. What we're doing this year is we're also expanding that to solid waste because we're seeing similar issues in solid waste. That has been extremely effective. Everyone who's been in the program has been placed in a job. But we're also looking at other innovative ways to help develop and improve workforce development and employment. We've worked with the Living Classrooms Foundation to help bring people on to mow operations and to mow different areas of different portions of the city. And I know Mr. Chalmers has had many meetings with various folks about how we can bring youth, our young people, to solid waste and start bringing them and moving them forward into a career that they may be very happy, very, very successful in.
Thank you. That's it from me, Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman Schleifer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
I can.
Okay.
Councilman, could you please turn on your video?
It should be on. It says it's on. Is it not coming up?
Oh, here we go. You're good.
Yeah, I can see him.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, so first off, Director, I want to pass on the highest accolades possible to Mr. Chalmers. He is absolutely the very best in city government. I've never come across anybody in my 4 years so far that is as responsive and gets things done as efficiently as Mr. Chalmers. So I want to put that out there. So thank you for that. Secondly, I do have a question regarding water billing. So obviously that's been an issue for many years. It certainly has improved regarding just basic cases with the escalation stuff that's been put in place. However, when it comes to the more challenging bills, like the ones that really need a lot more attention to figure out and work through, my experience has been quite difficult in getting those challenging cases resolved. So I wanted to know if there was anything that you guys, first, are you guys aware that that's still a major issue? And then number two, how do you plan on resolving that?
Thank you, Councilman. Yes, I agree. That is a major issue. These cases are extraordinarily complex. Many of them, when they get to these large multi-residence or industrial or commercial accounts, they can be extremely tedious, extremely difficult to resolve. One of the things that we are looking at is through the Water Affordability Act, we are looking at the appeals process and making that a more formalized appeals process where we lay out everything in very clear terms and lay out what people's rights are and what their processes are in terms of appealing that bill and how they can go about doing that. That also involves the use of the Environmental Control Board, which is going to be able to hear through hearing officers that they employ directly for this approach to be able to actually hear cases and to adjudicate or decide some of these cases after they've gone through the preliminary review within the department. It's something we need to formalize. It's something we're going to formalize. I agree. It's very difficult. It's very complex. We want to have a balance where we can ensure that the complexity is included, but we don't want a customer or others to feel so inundated and so exhausted from this stuff that they just can't understand it. So it's a very fine balancing act. Some of the one-offs, like you said, where people have seen spikes here or there, we've been able to jump on them very quickly, and I've been very pleased with that in the last few months. But some of these larger issues are going to have to be more systemic, and they're going to have to be more thoughtfully dealt with through a more formalized program where we document what we're doing so that we can then refer back to it in terms of precedent and other past actions. So
Yes.
I do share your concerns with that.
Yeah. So on that note, when it comes to the larger issues, what I find more than, and I appreciate that you're putting things in place, and the Environmental Control Board is great, and so I have confidence that process will be great once it's up and running. But as far as just follow through on these larger issues, like right now on the smaller issues, escalations, it gets assigned to a case manager, and that case manager owns that issue and has a timeline in which they go to resolve that. I mean, even right now in like today, if I have multiple issues that are still waiting to be resolved, it doesn't seem like there's anybody who really has ownership over them that has any timeline to dealing with it. So is there something in the more immediate future that we can do, especially when things get escalated up to our offices, that we have a go-to for those more challenging things with a timeline in place, that there'll be some accountability in getting them resolved?
I will talk to our customer service folks and see what we can do in order to move this process forward. I do completely agree with you. What we have actually found, we now have 100% remote billing operations and customer service operations. As others have found, our workers are able to get a lot more accomplished, quite frankly, working remotely. So I'm convinced I can talk with our CSSD, our customer service division, and start moving some things forward and trying to get an answer to that. But I share your concern, and I will get something and get it back to the committee.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad to hear that, the remote is up and running. And so when you do get that in place, if you can have one of those people reach out to me so that I can at least work through the issues that are still outstanding in my district.
Absolutely. I will commit to that.
Thank you. I'm good, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next up is Councilman Henry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I may be having connection issues here because I can't see anyone else up there except for Councilman Schleifer, who just went away. But I'm going to hope that I can be seen and heard. Is that true?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, we see you. You look great.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilwoman. So, Matt, I wanted to follow up on the article that just posted in the Sun about the coronavirus outbreak. How many employees have tested positive for COVID at Boley's?
John, can you provide those numbers?
Yeah, we have a total across the Bureau of 15. I believe 7 of those are assigned to Bowles.
About 20, how many, John, are in self-isolation currently?
So we have about 20 in self-isolation and another, like I said, 14 across the Bureau that actually, 15 across the Bureau that actually tested positive. And of those 15, 7 are assigned to Bowles.
Okay, out of how many total at Boley's?
7. There's a total of 7 that's positive.
No, I'm saying how many are
employees?
Are the 7 that have been tested positive and the 20 in self-isolation, does that comprise the total number of workers there?
No, so the number in isolation are across the Bureau. I don't have that, that data in front of me, but I can get that to you. But that's a combination of the Bureau.
What I'm getting, I guess where I'm trying to go with this is what other services are at risk because of that? What other operations are housed at Bowling Lane that could have interruption like the recycling?
So there are no other operations at Bowley's other than mixed refuse and recycling collection for the northeast and southeast portions of the city.
So does that mean that we are at the risk of having interruptions in regular trash collection
Okay.
as well?
Yeah, so I guess you missed Matt's opening remarks, and I
Yeah,
apologize.
sorry.
Yeah, and we apologize for getting this information out late. We just prior to this hearing had to make some decisions. So yes, service will be interrupted for about 3 weeks, in the sense that you won't have your regular crews picking up mixed waste and recycling. However, we will have crews out working, but we ask that you be patient with us because these aren't the crews assigned to those areas nor to that operation. So we're going to have a training issue as we move forward. For instance, if your trash is scheduled and your recycling is scheduled to be picked up tomorrow and we miss it, we will be coming back to pick it up either the next day. We will be working on Saturday for anything that we missed. But we ask that you be patient with us for the next 3 weeks as we work through this. I got to take my hat off to the men and women in the mixed refuse operation. Since day one, they've been coming to work. They've been completing their assignments. And unfortunately, it finally, made its way to, our operations. And we have to take these measurements because, the human capital that we have, those employees are near and dear to us, and we're going to take care of them. So we have to suspend services to make this work.
John, just to be clear, I'm not asking these questions because I'm questioning the decisions that were made. I'm asking these questions because I need to make sure that I understand exactly what is happening 100% to explain to the people who are
listen, I get it because when your phone rings, my phone rings. So yes, absolutely. I get where you're going. I just wanted to put that out there so folks understand.
So it sounded like you said that it is going to be potential interruptions to both recycling and mixed refuse.
That's correct. In the northeast and the southeast portions of the city.
Okay.
And for recycling across the city, we're suspending recycling across the entire city.
Okay.
So let me provide a little bit of some more detail on what we're doing. We're moving our drivers in the street sweeping operation. They will be picking up the regular routine service routes that have been suspended in Bowleys. We are also going to be using the recycle routes at both Bowleys and Reedburg. Reedburg is the west side, Bowleys is the east side. These are crews that are more experienced in driving in the narrow alleys in the neighborhoods within the city. We are going to be using those crews to help with those neighborhoods with the narrow alleys. The folks, street sweep operators, we are going to put them with crews in neighborhoods where the alleys are a bit larger or there's front collection so that there's not a safety issue. The recycling operation will be disrupted for 3 weeks. The trash, we hope there is no disruption. We are not planning on any disruption. Any disruption would be collected either very late or we would get it the next day. So that is what the disruption for trash service is. That's what we're expecting with that. We're also opening up the Sisson Street Convenience Center for people who do want to bring their recycling, and any bulk waste can go and drop that off there.
Mr. Chair, I still have more questions, but I know that I've exceeded my 2 straightforward ones for this round, so I'm happy to wait till the next round for the rest of my questions.
Councilman, thank you for the unprecedented following of the rules. It's greatly appreciated. Have we gone through? Oh, yep. Okay, so next up we've got Council Vice President Middleton. Then we'll go to Councilwoman Clark and then Councilman Dorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I apologize for missing the presentation. I had some technical difficulties, but I'm on now. So I hope that my question is, has not basically repeating itself. Well, first of all, my sentiments are the same as I've been hearing with all of my colleagues that, DPW has a whole lot of your jobs are just so important to the city, and they're very hard, strenuous work. And my hat's off again to John Chalmers, that head sanitation department. You just do a phenomenal job of with what you have, and you really cater to the constituents to the best way you can. You answer calls. So moving forward, I don't know if you talked about how important the connection is as far as illegal dumping sites, how your connection you must have with um, the housing inspectors. Did you cover any of that? And the importance of just of with that, we need that I'm finding that we really need that connection to catch and find these illegal dumpers that just get away with so much. We know that in some cases, some of this trash is coming from the county and being planted, but we need those cameras. We need um, housing inspectors to really partner with you. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I can, I can tell you that we often, more times than not, are cleaning the same locations over and over and over again. We definitely need a holistic strategy on how to change behavior. We will never ever clean our way out of this problem. And to change behavior, like you just said, we need more cameras. We need, more feet on the ground in certain locations where we know that this illegal dumping continues to happen over and over again. And if you look across the city, in the western portion of the city and the northwest portions of the city, we get a lot of dumping over and over again. We are working very closely with Park Heights Renaissance. The meeting scheduled to come up with a strategy, their services, and how we can best utilize the resources that the Bureau has and the resources that they have to get a better bang for our buck. But again, at the end of the day, we're just talking about cleaning up the area. We need to figure out how to change behavior and stop it.
Right. I do want to thank you for your partnership. I know Councilwoman Sneed is very interested in jobs and so on, and I know that you had partnered with Living Classroom and had a pilot program going. So I know firsthand that you are really trying to be a part of getting jobs filled and people hired, and kudos to you for that as well. And I'm going to stop right there because some of a few of the questions that I had, they were already answered.
Thank you.
So again, thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I may pick up on the subject that my colleague, Councilman Ed Reisinger raised. Basically, in Mr. Garbark, thank you, by the way, where are you? Oh, I see you. Hi. I'd like to thank you for all your help this month at Lake Montebello and all the good things that have gone on. And of course, Mr. Chalmers here is a hero to us all. And we're very happy. And I'm going to try to put some money in his budget right now, if I may. The money that the roundtable, the Fair Development Roundtable, they're the people that hired the consultant to do a zero waste study. When the city hired a consultant, and then we got them together, and I see think Martha Collins is around. She knows so well, and you do. And they kept in touch with each other, and they've come out with surprisingly similar recommendations. Our issue right now is this coronavirus. We want to come into a new world, and that new world is a zero waste world. And to do that right now, we have to ask you, and we have to ask the mayor to help us add money to Mr. Chalmers' budget here. And that's for the equity of making neighborhoods, all 200,000 households in those neighborhoods, part of the recycling that we should have in every neighborhood, but really don't. And another $7 million for composting. Composting, as you well know, is 25% of what we put into Bresco to get burned up and buried. We're trying to close Bresco. Well, maybe you're not, but we are trying to get, so we're not polluting the whole city by burning our trash. And part of it is composting to get that out of that stream and into reuse and composting and turning into other products for businesses. So we're not gonna, I'm not here to cut Mr. Chalmers in your budget. I'm here to ask that you help us get, let's see, 9 million in there to get everybody into recycling containers that they need, and 7 million to get into these compost bins. And we're going to already get that wonderful grant with partnership grant, 250,000. That's given out a lot of information about what you can recycle and what they won't take anymore. And put that together with YouthWorks. We need to be out there this summer beginning that process. And that's what we so desperately ask your help with. We got to get going with zero waste as we come out of this coronavirus, because it's a new day and we want the new day of equity in our trash collections in the neighborhoods. I mean, for people to have the right equipment and the right information. And we want it to start so that we can begin putting these small local businesses together that capture some of the recycling, capture all of the composting, and get us out of burning and polluting and into a new day. So that's my speech. It's not a question. I'm just saying we need you to do that, to help get that money, that budget. And of course, we're going to also be asking the mayor to agree to that. And Mr. Chalmers, is that okay if we get it? I know you.
I think Matt would agree that he would put a smile on our face if we were to get money for recycling.
Right, and ours too. So we're working it, and we think it's crucial to get going, and not to wait too long, wait to the 90% diversion goal. And so that's really probably more than one question, but I have one other thing to say, because I suggested it to one of your higher ups, and nobody ever agreed to this. Here's my theory. We used to have moratoriums on parking tickets, okay? And people waited for them and they rejoiced. Now, looking at a long history of water billing, and especially after we put our new meters in, there were awful lot of spikes in people's bills. They hired plumbers. They hired everybody. They talked to the city. They told them there's no reason, it doesn't make sense. And those spikes haunt them to this day because they could never pay them off in their monthly bills. So what I'm saying is, let's have a moratorium that goes back a year on spikes. All right, nobody can explain it. It doesn't make sense. It's killing you every month because it's adding up on your water bill, take it away. Have a one-time, 1-year moratorium. You had a spike since we got monthly billing and meters up until now. Come in and talk to us, and let's see if you're eligible for the moratorium on that spike and its all of its effects across the billing cycle. Okay? Think about it. And thank you very much for all your leadership and for Chief Brackett up there at Montebello and all your support and help with so many things that we do every day.
Thank you, Councilwoman, and always thank you for your leadership and your support of the department.
Oh yeah,
that's a very, very interesting. That is a very interesting consideration. That we will look into that.
I know. I already. And you know what? You'll save money. You know why? Because all those escalation ladies that my colleagues was praising so rightly will not have to spend so many of their hours futilely, because there are some things that happen in life that cannot be explained, and what we have to do with them is take them away and move on with our lives. Think about it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Councilman Dorsey.
Thank you. So, Marcia, you and I have been going back and forth over the last week or so trying to get sorted out the matter of the budget question that I asked a year ago. We don't actually have an answer to that question. And so I want to just talk about the issue a little bit again and talk about why it's important that we address the forested lands that we own in which our reservoirs lie at Loch Raven, at Pretty Boy, and at Liberty Reservoir. You sent me an email yesterday. It has a bunch of links to a bunch of different documents, and you gave a kind of an overview of what the challenges are that the department faces in trying to answer the question. The question being, what will it cost our ratepayers in increases in water bills when we face increased costs to treat water because of the degradation of the forests that buffer our source water reservoirs? One of the documents that you sent me recently was a study called A Comprehensive Forest Conservation Plan for Long-Term Watershed Protection on the City of Baltimore's Reservoirs. I will note here that I believe that what you've sent me a couple of times in is about 36 pages long, and the document in the table of contents makes reference to, I believe, somewhere in the ballpark of 150 pages. So I'm curious about that, but we can address that later. But this is a 2003 study that was commissioned through the city, through DPW, and through the state. And it makes no bones about it that the forests around our reservoirs are in very unhealthy condition, that they are lacking an understory, which means that there is not a full and thriving ecosystem of plant life that is necessary to filter water that is moving through the forests and into our reservoirs, and that there is a threat to the regeneration of the forested lands, which is precisely what I asked about a year ago, is that as we continue to face a threat to these forested buffers through, one, the deer population continuing to grow, and let me just preempt here. I know that the answer is, well, we sanction and we license hunting in these reservoir areas. Yes, but we don't sanction and license hunting in Baltimore City, So deer continues to migrate back and forth between the city and the county. So the deer population actually isn't being controlled to any credible degree. The deer population, along with invasive plants, which we're essentially doing nothing to control in any way, climate change, which is something we're really not doing anything about, and the recreational activity, which we're doing, a so-so job of controlling, but we're not doing anything to curtail further. These things combined mean that our forests continue to face a continuous degradation that we're not reversing, that will absolutely lead to increased water costs from treatment, that will be passed on to the ratepayers in our water system. And so I think now that I have these documents that make clear that the department has known for almost 20 years through its own study that the forests are in bad condition, I guess I'm still as interested as I was a year ago to know how much it is going to cost ratepayers, because I think that the public deserves to know that we can project that their rates will increase directly related to the forest degradation. But I want to know now what we're doing, because we know and have known for a long time. And I also want to acknowledge that in the response that I got yesterday, it acknowledges that part of the challenge that we face is that we only own 7% of our watershed area. The other 93% not only is privately owned, but it's privately owned in Baltimore County and Carroll County, where we have no ability to control the way that they develop land. And also that we have only kind of voluntary agreements to talk with other people about what we think would be good. I acknowledge that we have difficulty in that we don't control what happens on that 93% of the watershed area, but we have 100% control over the forested buffer around our reservoirs, and that forested buffer contributes 100% of the benefit that forested buffer areas contribute. We have to do everything that we can with that little 7% that we actually have control on, and not defer our responsibility by saying, sorry, we don't have control over this other 93%. What are we doing to do everything that we can to protect our source water in those forested areas?
Thank you, Councilman. I mean, that's absolutely a critical question, and I do want to apologize for the confusion in getting that answer back to you. We had drafted one last. I just apologize. I don't know how it didn't get to you, but we've gotten everything that you need, and we're gonna talk through and try to resolve, answer your question. Specific to the question that you asked, you're absolutely right. A forested buffer is absolutely critical to source water protection. Some of the things we're doing is we are actively looking at land that can be purchased. We are looking at ways that land can be deeded to us, given to us. Just recently, there was a parcel of land in the Loch Raven Reservoir that FEMA had actually assumed control over because it was getting flooded so many times. That was eventually deeded to the county, and the county deeded it to us. So we added that into our overall area of the watershed. One thing that is in our capital program, and this is going to help a lot, is a comprehensive watershed management plan. We want to bring a group of experts in to examine our watershed, to look at all of the points you hit in all of the issues that we have in the watershed and help us develop a way forward that modernizes and protects that source water for decades, if not generations to come. One of the things that I know you know very well is our regulations there, our enforcement. They're out of date. Things have been put in for 20, 30 years and they haven't been changed, and they don't really affect what's going on now. And there's a bunch of different regulations for one that's not the same as the other. The issue with the forest and the water treatment that you're talking about, the treatment, we have a very robust treatment. So, I mean, it's beyond national standards, beyond industry standard. It treats most of what we offer. The real big issue in the watershed is the loss of the forest buffer creates more erosion and sediment. What that does is that comes into the river, into the reservoir, it starts filling the reservoir so that the amount of water that is there starts decreasing, which means ultimately we're going to have to either dredge it or we're going to have to expand it or somehow treat it better. Also, for extremely hazardous materials, oil spills, gasoline, things that might spill, that buffer also helps to absorb that, because that can be really dangerous to get into the water system. Yosef Kabedi is on the call. Yosef, do you want to add anything else? I know you and Clark Howes, who's our watershed manager, have been looking at this issue quite extensively.
Yes, so you are correct. The comprehensive watershed study, we are currently working on making sure there's a minority and women-owned business participation, but we should be advertising that shortly. But we also have a landscape restoration grant in collaboration with the Maryland DNR. That grant is about $200,000, which required an in-kind contribution from us that we are providing in the form of data collection by our personnel. And the whole purpose of that grant and that study is to do what you mentioned earlier, Councilman Dorsey, which is to address the health and vitality of the forest surrounding the reservoirs, to address resiliency issues as far as climate change is concerned. We're looking at, with the study, we will look at, for instance, planting southern species that are more resilient to high temperatures. That, along with the comprehensive study, will help us to formulate a better idea of what steps need to be taken. But without a doubt, the partnerships that we have already established with Carroll County, Baltimore County, all the surrounding stakeholders is what's critical to making sure that we can maintain source water quality, and help to ensure that we don't have a extreme degradation that would impact treatment costs down the line.
Thank you. I appreciate that there's some progress, some movement here toward actually getting a study out and together and and developing a plan of action. And I do consider that progress. And I'm just going to also take a second to note here that while John Chalmers is wonderful and everybody's giving a lot of acknowledgement to John Chalmers, Yosef Kabede has been one of the most amazing additions to DPW in my 4 years here. So I just want to give that acknowledgement also. And so to come back to this, while I appreciate and think it is really progress that we're moving towards having a study, I still think that there are things that I've brought up in budget hearings in the past that we're not doing, that we could be doing immediately to address certain concerns. I think we need to anticipate that our study is going to say that this is a reservoir. It's not a park. This is not a place where people should be coming for the purpose of recreation. That is in direct conflict with conserving it for its primary purpose as a drinking water reservoir. To that end, before we, anticipate prohibiting all recreation, we could be taking certain steps to stop accommodating it to some degree. We are still mowing grass all the way right up to the water's edge, and that grass is a critical part of filtering water and erosion of soil directly into our water. And the reason that we are mowing that grass, spending money to burn gasoline and use machines to cut that grass, is in order specifically to accommodate recreation, which by and large is not being performed recreation by people who are actually ratepayers into the system. The people who live the closest to Loch Raven Reservoir do not rely on it as water, and the same thing can be said for Pretty Boy Reservoir. And so we're actually spending money in contradiction to our own interests with respect to this. And so I'd like to have a follow-up meeting. Joseph, this is not something that you and I have dug deep into, but I'd really like to do like a one-on-one, just you and me about this, if we could, please. That's all I'm going to say about this for right now, because I want to carry this conversation on later. I do want to just also acknowledge, Marcia, I have asked on several occasions for documentation of any plans that exist around stormwater and sewer restoration along the portion of Herring Run Park from where it meets Chinkapin Run down into Bel Air Road and the lower Herring Run area, or the middle Herring Run area, I suppose. From where it meets Chinkapin Run down to Bel Air Road is my primary concern. We have one of these manholes in there that continuously blows open during big storms. That's in my district. It's in my neighborhood. I'm tired of hearing about it and not having any answers as to what our plan is to address this in the short term or the long term. I've asked several times for these plans, and I have not received any response about it, except for just in the last week, a passing comment to the effect that there's going to be some work somewhere near there. So I would really like to know what we're actually doing to address this section of the Herring Run. And no need to respond here. I'm just putting it on the record that I've asked for this multiple times and I've received nothing. The Friends of Herring Run Parks want this. I want this, and plenty of other people in my district want to know what's going on. Not to mention the many people who continue to read about these manhole blowups all across the city. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilman, we will commit to get you something by the end of the week, I assure you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I believe we have cycled through every council member. There's a council member who has not had an opportunity to ask 2 questions yet. Please speak up now. Okay, back to Council President Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Director Garbach, I want to go back to service 672 again, just to ask some follow-up questions. We know over the past year, we found out that, you know, there were places that didn't receive bills since the time they were built. I asked questions at the Board of Estimates about trying to figure out how many of those unpaid bills were from the city. Did we have similar things that were happening in Baltimore County? And want to see if we have an update on a final update on all of those erroneous bills or bills not being sent at all, and where we are in that process, both from a city billing perspective, but also a, you know, system-wide perspective.
Sure. Yeah, thank you for that question. That was something I know Deputy Chief of Operations Cheryl Goldstein had been working on. She was leading a whole audit to look into this from the mayor's office level. My understanding is that I think that was put on hold during COVID. Everyone was sort of put out to deal with COVID. That is coming back on to line now to look at all of this stuff, and it is going to be finished. It's going to be completed very soon. I don't have the exact update or time for that. It was being run out of the mayor's office.
Well, I know we have Mr. Stegman on the line. Matt, do you have any update on that at all?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I do not at the moment, but I did make a note. I will circle around with Deputy Chief Goldstein, and we will get a update to you as soon as possible.
Thank you. And just make sure that we're breaking it down in the update by both city and then the regional. And Mr. Goldberg, actually went in my right after I became council president, we had a discussion at the board, actually before you were acting director, about looking at the system as you guys were negotiating with the county at the time and talking, and we were informed that the way that the negotiation was done was based on some kind of a rating system agreement from the 70s. Do we have an update on that? Have you been able to go back and negotiate something from this millennia, or are we still basing it on the 70s?
You're absolutely right that the 1973 agreement is what many of our operations have been based on. We have been working very closely with Baltimore County. County Executive Oshevsky has been very interested in this issue as well as you have, Mr. President, and the administration, and we are actively looking at everything. There is currently an end-to-end study that we are jointly funding between the county and the city that is looking at the entire utility end-to-end. That is looking, including the agreements and the governance documents that we are guided by, as well as everything to our infrastructure, our asset management, and some of the other things that we do as a utility. That is on a very fast track schedule. I know Mayor Young and County Executive Oshevsky had made that a priority, that they wanted to move quickly on it. It has gotten underway. I need to get the exact timing because it was delayed a little bit by ransomware and then COVID. But that is looking at everything about how we are performing and functioning as a utility. I certainly agree that times have changed, a lot has changed, and it is important to update and to reflect what is currently, in place now. The issue with this agreement, it was used to, I believe, inform arbitration between us and the county, which to this day is still being used in certain disputes. So I think there is some unraveling that needs to happen with that agreement, but we're hoping this end-to-end review will start pointing out some ways that things can be streamlined, that we can modernize, that we can update everything.
Thank you, and thank you. And the faster you can get us a timeline on that, I think that would be very helpful. I think that the study, that's the way to go. We have to analyze it top to bottom. And when you now know that we have a council now, that the majority of us weren't born when that agreement was made, we know that it's time to have it reviewed. And then the last thing, I guess this would really be for Mr. Chalmers, a couple things. I am concerned now with the thing with Bolus, but also just concerned about once you're able to go back and have your crews for cleaning and dumping and go out, about the amount of work that they're going to be facing to overcome stuff that may have gotten missed because of the shutdown due to COVID. Mr. Chalmers, can you talk about what you think that workload is going to be and how we're able to work through that while trying to actually tackle the issues that we know neighborhoods are facing now because of COVID?
So we're going to be watching the service requests as they come in and strategically using the dashboard that we created to use the services that we have to the best of our ability. Again, this is unprecedented. We've never been faced with a situation like this. Also looking to other agencies. If other agencies can pitch in and help us. I talked about the backlog from September to May 29th. That was a result of a collaboration with DOT, DGS, and Rec and Parks. And I want to take my hat off to them because if it wasn't for the collaboration, we wouldn't have made it to zero. So we're going to be looking at, again, the flow of requests that are coming in, the resources that we have, looking outside to the private sector, beefing up drivers. We're going to be looking at the entire picture to figure out what is the best course of action to handle the workload. You're right. It's going to be an enormous task.
Thank you. Thank you. And then the last thing for you, Mr. Chalmers, also is I know Councilman Costello talked about it a little earlier. Can you just, and I missed it for my, I think Comcast was throttling my internet. So can you talk about where we are on like the GPS program for the drivers, especially like the street sweepers, so they can make sure that the routes are being done?
Yeah, I know last year, I know we talked about this. You bring it up every time, keep making these promises. Unfortunately for us, ransomware hit, the COVID pandemic hit, and it threw everything off track. We do have an agreement signed. We are ready to move forward. I'm going to be forwarding over to Councilman Costello a timeline. I can do the same for you as well.
Yes, and we think that's going to have to come before the Board of Estimates.
I got to check. Let me check.
I would imagine it would. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm just assuming it would be that big.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. President. Matt, have we touched, because I had to step out a couple times, have we touched on graffiti rub out or graffiti removal?
I did mention it in the presentation. It was cut from.
Yeah, can we just talk about how the department is able to address graffiti removal moving forward?
So that's a very good question. We're thinking through a couple of different scenarios now. We have 4 box trucks that have been retrofitted with our equipment that we use. We use a pretty ingenious process for using glass, baking soda, and water. It's less abrasive, but just as effective at removing graffiti. What we're working through is obviously the service has to continue. This is something that the city is going to continue. And we're working through considering whether the different agencies who have a lot of graffiti on their assets would take one or some of these vehicles and be trained to remove the graffiti themselves, or if it would be retained within the Department of Public Works. Perhaps we create an internal service fund, and DPW then goes and removes the graffiti on the asset that, for instance, a bridge, a traffic signal, something like that maybe another department owns. That's what we're trying to work through right now. This is not going away. It was the funding is obviously not there, but it's going to be absorbed into either our operations and property management, and then we'll be looking for cost sharing with other agencies, or we'll have other agencies brought in and bring them up to speed with graffiti removal. With that is something that is still being thought through in terms of actual implementation.
Got it. Will the way you file a service request through 311 remain the same for that?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't anticipate anything different other than putting this specific asset, which if we do go to it being directed to a different department, it would just refer that to that particular department if that was the way we would go forward with it.
Got it. Second question, which is a question I posed to the health department last evening, is around the removal of dead animals. Very frequently, constituents who have dead rats on their street or on the sidewalk, and we don't have a city agency that removes them. So when I posed the question to the health department, the initial response I received was, well, animal control does go out and remove animals, but we don't remove small animals like dead birds and dead squirrels and dead rats. And we have a lot of rats in the city, right? So how do we, and I hate to suggest giving any more responsibility to Mr. Chalmers, who does a fantastic job with the limited resources he has. How do we get to a place where city government can collect dead rats? Honestly, my belief is that the health department should do that.
I think that's a very good question. I think Obviously, that does pose an environmental and a public health risk. I think we'll need to talk through that about how we can support health, or health support us, or how we would go forward in doing something like that. Because I certainly see the issue with that. But you're absolutely right. There's really been nothing, other than roadkill that perhaps causes a traffic issue because it is a larger animal, a deer or something like that, blocking a road that could be hazardous. A smaller animal like a rat or something that poses a health issue or environmental issue, that hasn't been something that I think we necessarily thought through, but it's something we should and I would look forward to having those discussions.
So I mentioned that to Mary Beth Haller. Could you guys coordinate with the health department and maybe circle up with me in the next month? Just start to have some preliminary conversations. I don't expect
Absolutely.
to have a process this month or next, but I think this is something we can work out in the relatively near future.
Absolutely. Happy to
Mr.
set it
Chair,
up.
Councilman Henry.
could you loop my office into that? I'd like to be part of that conversation.
Absolutely. Yep.
Thank you.
Certainly. Happy to do so.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to go in a different order now because you all have moved around in musical chairs on the WebEx. So I'm going to go to Councilwoman Sneed.
No further questions.
Council Vice President Middleton.
No further questions.
Councilman Henry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I still have more questions. I had one last question remaining about the employees at Bowley's Lane, which was, are they already receiving hazard pay, and do they already have adequate PPE, or do we need to be providing any additional equipment?
The employees at Bowley's Lane, they are receiving the hazardous pay.
Okay.
And we have an abundance of PPE. We have a asset management team that monitors that daily. And we issue those PPEs out on a daily basis, and we make employees sign for it. And we reiterate each day how important it is to wear those PPEs.
Excellent. Okay. And then my second question was, when will communities be able to get pitch-in dumpsters back? Because we understand that's a service that's been suspended right now due to COVID-19, but we're having we're having a real problem in some neighborhoods where there is and I've heard, some of my colleagues have already commented on this. There is a lot of illegal dumping. Even during the best of times, we're barely fighting a holding action against it. And when you take away the city's participation in getting rid of those large-scale dumping efforts, even if communities would like to pitch in and take care of it themselves, they need the stuff hauled away. And so when can we get those pitch-in dumpsters back?
So go ahead, John.
Go ahead, Matt. Go ahead.
That's something we've heard more than nearly anything that about our suspended services. That's one of the things that we hear constantly about, and I completely agree, Councilman. That's currently we're looking at that actively. The initial concern, the continuing concern, was these programs, and it's sadly these programs are so popular. People really like them, and it really gets a lot of people to come out. The overarching concern was how to maintain that level of distance, how to maintain social distancing, and would this be basically the city encouraging larger groups to come out? It's something we're working through. We're obviously the state is moving forward, and city's moving forward. It's something we're looking at now. It needs to come back, and we are going to it's something that is being evaluated currently, but we want to make sure it can be done in the safest manner possible.
Oh, I'm sorry. We'd been working under the assumption that it was an issue in terms of staffing, given your other issues. If you're not providing pitch and dumpsters because you don't want to encourage people to gather, I take that worry off your plate. That shouldn't be the determining factor for this. The people, any group of our citizens who are engaged enough to be doing their own neighborhood cleanups are engaged enough to be paying attention to the advice that we're getting from the health department on how to stay safe when doing it. So I would strongly encourage you to, if it's not a resource issue, I strongly encourage you to get that service unsuspended as quickly as possible.
Yes, sir. Understood. Yes, it was one of those things when all of this went in, we sort of clamped down just citywide on a bunch of different operations. It's one of the services we are looking at bringing back as soon as we can.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
And I don't know who, I thought I saw Councilman Costello leave the chambers. Who's chairing right now?
I'm here.
Oh, okay. All right. I think that the only other question I had was just a data one that kind of followed up on your earlier question about graffiti cleaning, which was how much is cutting, graffiti cleaning currently saving the department?
So I believe it's about $700,000, which is in the budget. Troy, are you still on? Can you provide that level of detail?
763,000 to be exact.
Correct. All right. That was all I had, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilman Reisinger.
I'm good.
Thank you. Councilman Burnett.
I'm good, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Schleifer. Councilman Schleifer. Council President Scott.
Good.
Councilman Dorsey.
Oh, I'm sorry. Councilman Dorsey.
I have some
on
too.
my WebEx.
Yeah, sorry about that. I have some too, but I'll wait. Go ahead, Council.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Council President. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We passed the Water Accountability and Equity Act. It was signed into law in January of this year. One of the provisions in that, through an amendment that I put in, requires a study of the infrastructure fee. I think you're all aware of it because we all had a meeting about it some months ago. But this relates to examining the basis of the infrastructure fee on the basis of property size as a primary determinant, rather than simply on the basis of meter size. If any of my colleagues, by the way, would like my kind of briefing on this concept, I would love to share it with you. But I want to know where DPW is with this study, and what progress is being made. And I'd like to know if the money is there in order to make sure that it happens.
Certainly. Understood. I don't have that information with me right now, but I can certainly get it and get back to the committee and to you, Councilman.
Okay. Does Mr. Cabede have any information on it?
Yes. Mr. Cabede, do you have any information or?
I do not. We would have to confer and get it to you, Councilman Dorsey.
Okay, so who's in charge of that? Who are we checking with?
Troy Brogdon. Troy.
Yes,
I have
we
an
will.
update on that. Troy has been coordinating with our consultants who have been looking at that. Do you have any update on that?
No, but I will reach out to them first thing in the morning.
We will get you that as soon as we hear something, Councilman.
Great. And who's our consultant on that?
It's Raftellus. Excuse me. They do all the rate studies for us and the cost estimation.
All right, great. This is ringing a bell. It's been a while since we had that meeting. I would like a status update on this in general. My other question is about property maintenance for properties that are allocated to the comptroller's office. They're not assigned to any other particular agency. There are 5 adjacent, more or less, properties that the city owns at the end of a dead-end street in my district. The grass is like 4 or 5 feet tall right now. And I'm pretty sure that that somebody has gone out to investigate it, in response to a 311 request. But I just want to know which agency is responsible for maintaining properties that are not, within the responsibility. They're just city-owned properties. Is DPW? These are lots that have never ever been developed.
So if these are city-owned properties, they should fall within my purview to manage, and that should be. We should have a service request number generated by HCD. Can you give me the actual addresses so I can look these properties up?
Yeah, if I don't know what the numbers are if you were to look them up by block lot, but if you were to look at it on a map, they are the properties that would be at 4100, 4102, 4101, 3, and 5 St. Thomas Avenue.
And Mr. Councilman, if I can just add, Mr. Chalmers, this is a conversation that I've had with DOT and other folks in DPW before. This problem exists very specifically in Northwest, Northeast, North Baltimore, where we have a lot of those paper alleys and streets, even some that were actual streets that Ms. Collins and I and some other folks in DOT were working on as of a few weeks ago, where we have actual streets, not just alleys that have not been maintained. Because there are some others that I'll send you as well that are, you couldn't get to them because another agency who we'll have a hearing for later this week hasn't maintained their portion. So there are many of these.
Okay.
And to that point, I have a constituent who has been contacting me for the last year about the condition of a paper alley along Roselawn Avenue, immediately east of Hamlet. We just can't make any progress there unless we get, we realize, I recognize that the city's position has been, sorry, it's an alley, we don't maintain those. But at a certain point, it's been neglected for so long that the average citizen is hopeless against trying to even begin the maintenance and needs DPW to step in.
So I know I lived in a house where there was a paper alley, and I actually was responsible for maintaining that paper alley behind my house. The citizen is responsible for the alley in the rear of their property. This is a situation where they need some assistance to get it to a level where they can actually maintain it. I'll be more than glad to work with them and get that done.
I will follow up with you directly about that. Thank you, Mr. Chalmers. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Council President Scott.
Actually, thank you, Mr. Chalmers. I just wanted to, that was actually going to be my line of questioning. It must be the Northeast Baltimore in me that was going to lead me that way. But my follow-up would be that I think that we need to have a further conversation, not just review, but with DOT, the Comptroller's Office, and Rec and Parks, because while you're right, there are many instances where it's an alley and the citizen should be maintaining. Actually, my parents had one behind their house, and when I cut their grass, I have to cut that too, right? But there are also many that are actual streets with names that are not being maintained that often lead to other lots that are maintained by the city, which is causing issues for many residents. So I think we have to look at that.
Yeah, I think we need to go out, identify those locations, do sort of a asset management to figure out where they are. And they need to be on a schedule. If it's a street, and I know we've had this conversation over and over again, but that is the right approach to this. We need to get the other agencies in the room and figure this out and fix it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. President. Matt, do we have any idea on when rat rub out services will resume?
So they have resumed. We
did.
Yeah, we are monitoring that every day. We are sending crews out. I don't know, John, what our current numbers are.
Yes, so we have a total of 14 pest control workers, and presently we have 7 on the street. And I got to tell you, if you look at the citizen-generated service requests, we are doing pretty darn good. But we are out working. We are responding to citizen requests, and we're continuing with our proactive program, going throughout the city, looking for rat barrels and baiting where needed. I was talking to Director Garber earlier this week. One of the concerns we had was, the fact that these restaurants will be moving to curbside. We're looking at those locations. We're making sure that we go through those locations to proactively look for rat barrels to make sure that we don't have an outbreak. So, but for the duration of this pandemic, we've done outstanding with keeping those service requests down. And I think we can contribute that to the fact that we've always had a proactive approach to managing rodents.
That's excellent. Thank you. I wish I knew that service had resumed, but thank you for that. I'm good. Colleagues, any other questions? President Scott, Dorsey, Sneed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm good. Appreciate it.
Sneed, Henry.
I'm good, Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you.
Schleifer, is he still on? Reisinger,
Good.
Burnett, Middleton.
I'm good.
All right. Matt, Marcia, entire DPW team, thank you all very much. We are now in recess until 9 a.m. tomorrow. 9 a.m. tomorrow. Thank you. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members.